I once threw a coin into a little girl's bag of trash without even looking at her face. 3 seconds later, my entire world stopped because hanging from her tiny wrist was a bracelet I buried with the memory of my lost daughter 8 years ago. The daughter I was told had died. The daughter I never stopped searching for. And there she was, digging through garbage outside my own company building. Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please leave a comment, and subscribe to Storyflow Diaries. The morning I found my daughter, I wasn't looking for anything except silence. When you run a company with thousands of employees, silence becomes a luxury you rarely get. My name is Daniel Harwood, and on paper, I'm the CEO of one of the fastest growing recycling and packaging corporations in the state. People see the suits, the glass offices, the headlines. They see success. What they don't see is the quiet emptiness that follows you home every night when the lights turn off. 8 years ago, my life broke in half. My wife Elena and I had a daughter named Lily. She had soft brown curls that never stayed brushed, and a laugh that could knock the air out of your lungs because it was so pure. Every night she'd run down the hallway wearing these little socks with stars on them, jump into my arms, and ask me to tell her the story about the treasure princess. I must have told that story 1,000 times. Then one night, everything changed. Alina took Lily on a trip to visit her sister. There was an accident on the highway. That's what the police told me. The car flicked. Fire spread. By the time anyone reached them, it was too late. At least, that's what I was told. They found Elena, but Lily, they said the fire made identification impossible. There was no body I could hold, no goodbye I could whisper, just a report, a funeral, and a tiny bracelet recovered near the wreckage that the officer handed to me in a plastic evidence bag. A silver bracelet with a small engraved sunflower. I kept it in my safe for years, not because I believed she was gone, but because some part of me refused to let the world close that door completely. People told me grief fades. They lied. Grief changes shape, that's all. It becomes quieter, more patient. It sits beside you in meetings. It rides with you in the back seat of your car. It waits until the house is empty and then reminds you of the sound of little feet running down a hallway that no longer echoes. That morning started like any other. My assistant was listing problems before I even finished my coffee. A shipment delay, investors asking questions, a board member complaining about budget cuts. But the truth is, I wasn't listening. My office sits on the 12th floor, overlooking the back lot of our headquarters. Most executives prefer the skyline view, but I chose the rear side years ago when we built the building. Back there, you can see the sorting trucks, the recycling bays, the loading docks. Real work. Honest work. That's when I noticed her. At first, she was just movement near the dumpsters. A small figure digging through black trash bags like someone searching for lost treasure. I frowned. Kids sometimes wandered near the lot, but security usually pushed them away fast. There are sharp machines back there, trucks reversing, workers carrying scrap metal. It isn't a safe place. But no one had stopped her. I watched for a minute longer than I should have. She was small, too small to be alone out there. Something about the way she moved bothered me. Not careless like a child playing. Careful, experienced, like she'd done it 100 times before. I sighed, grabbed my coat, and headed downstairs. Maybe I told myself I was just checking security. Maybe I didn't want to admit that something in my chest had already started tightening. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like cold glass. The smell of cardboard, metal, and damp pavement hung around the lotting area. She didn't notice me first. The girl was crouched beside a torn garbage bag, carefully separating bottles into a smaller sack slung over her shoulder. Her hair was messy, tied with a piece of faded ribbon. Her coat was at least 2 sizes too big. I'd seen poverty before. You can't run a recycling company without seeing the people who survive on what others throw away. But seeing a child doing it alone, that was different. "Hey," I said gently. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Her eyes were cautious in a way that didn't belong on a kid's face. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, already stepping back. "I'll go." Her voice was soft but practiced, like someone used to apologizing before trouble arrived. I felt something twist in my chest. "You don't have to run," I told her. "This place can be dangerous, though." She nodded but kept holding the sack. I didn't think. I ran. A man in his 40s wearing a tailored coat has no business sprinting across a loading yard, but I didn't feel the cold or hear the workers shouting my name. All I could see was that small figure darting past the trucks, the oversized coat flapping behind her like a flag of panic. My heart was hammering so hard it felt dangerous. The bracelet couldn't be coincidence. My mind kept repeating it over and over like a drumbeat, that scratch, that exact charm. I watched Lily wear it every single day until the night she was taken from me. The girl slipped between 2 recycling containers and almost vanished behind a stack of flattened cardboard. "Wait!" I called out, my voice breaking in a way that surprised even me. She ran faster. For a second, I was afraid she'd reach the street and disappear into the city the way so many forgotten children do. But luck, or fate, intervened. One of the forklift drivers had paused near the exit gate, blocking the path just long enough for me to close the distance. When she turned and saw me only a few steps away, she froze like a cornered animal. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Those eyes, those same deep brown eyes, my mind resisted the thought forming inside it. I slowed down, raising my hand slightly so she wouldn't feel trapped. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said softly, trying to steady my breath. She watched me carefully, calculating whether to bolt again. Kids who grow up on the streets learn to measure people quickly. Trust isn't something they're given, it's something they defend. "Why did you run?" I asked. She shrugged, but her grip tightened on the sack of bottles. "People yell," she said quietly, "or take the bags." The simple honesty of that answer hurt more than I expected. I glanced again toward her sleeve. The bracelet was hidden now, but I knew it was there. My mind was racing through impossible explanations. Maybe someone found Lily's bracelet years ago and passed it along. Maybe this was coincidence twisted by grief. Maybe I was a desperate man seeing ghosts where they didn't exist. But something deeper than logic refused to let it go. "That bracelet," I said carefully, "where did you get it?" Her eyes instantly hardened again. "It's mine." "I know. I'm just asking where it came from." She didn't answer. A cold breeze moved through the yard, rustling plastic and paper around us. I noticed how thin her shoes were, the kind sold in discount bins, worn down near the toes. My chest tightened again. "What's your name?" I asked. A pause, long enough that I thought she might lie. "Maya," she finally said. Maya. The name sat strangely in my ears. For a moment, I imagined what it would sound like if someone else had raised my daughter, if someone had renamed her, reshaped her life, erased me from it. I pushed the thought away before it could grow teeth. "Maya," I repeated, "do you come here every day?" She nodded once. "Sometimes earlier, before guards." That meant she knew the routine. She had studied our schedules, survived around them. The idea that a child had been doing that near my building without me knowing made shame creep up my neck. I swallowed. "Who takes care of you?" She looked away toward the street. "I take care." 3 words, flat, final. My throat tightened. I remembered Lily learning to tie her shoes, struggling with the laces while Elena laughed softly beside her. That memory collided violently with the image in front of me, a little girl sorting garbage to survive. "Can I see the bracelet?" I asked quietly. She shook her head immediately. "No. Please. No." The fear in her voice was sharper now, not stubbornness, protection. That told me something important. That bracelet mattered to her, which meant it hadn't just been found yesterday. She had kept it for a long time. My pulse quickened again. "Maya," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "I'm not trying to take it. I think I've seen one like it before." That made her hesitate, just slightly. Her eyes flickered back to mine, searching for something she couldn't name. "Where?" she asked. The question hit me like thunder. I didn't know how to answer without sounding insane, so I told a partial truth. My daughter had one. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes moved, a tiny ripple in still water. "Had?" she asked. "A long time ago," I said. Silence stretched between us. A truck engine roared somewhere behind the building, but it sounded far away. I realized my hands were shaking again. If I pushed too hard, she'd run. If I said too much, she might disappear from my life forever. I forced myself to slow down. "You must be cold. Have you eaten today?" She didn't answer immediately. Pride again, then a small shrug. That was enough for me. "There's a cafe across the street. You can bring the bag if you want. I won't take anything from you." She studied my face for several seconds in a way that felt far older than a child should be capable of. People think kids don't read adults well. They're wrong. Kids raised around danger read people better than anyone. Finally, she spoke. "You're the boss here." It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. "Yes, bosses call police." The statement was simple, matter of fact. My chest ached again. "Not today." Another pause. Then something shifted slightly in her posture. Not trust, but curiosity, or maybe hunger winning a quiet argument. She took one cautious step closer, and as she adjusted the sack on her shoulder, the sleeve slipped again. The bracelet caught the light. This time I saw it clearly. The same sunflower charm, the same tiny scratch near the clasp. My vision blurred for a second as a memory crashed through me. Lily, at 5 years old, sitting on the kitchen counter while Elena fastened that bracelet around her wrist. "Now everyone will know you're my sunshine," Elena had said. Lily giggled and waved it proudly at me. The past and present slammed together so violently that I nearly lost my balance. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Maya, who gave you that?" Her fingers instinctively closed over the bracelet. She hesitated, and for the first time since I met her, she looked. For a moment, neither of us moved. The wind slid across the yard, carrying the smell of rain and metal, and I realized my heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid she could hear it. Maya looked down at the bracelet like she hadn't expected it to betray her secret. The tiny sunflower swung gently from her wrist. My mind kept screaming the same impossible thought, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I frightened her now, she might disappear forever. "Who gave it to you?" I asked again, but softer this time. She hesitated, long enough that I could see she was deciding whether to trust me with the truth. "My mama," she said finally. The word hit me harder than any punch ever could. My chest tightened instantly. Elena's face flashed through my mind, but something didn't line up. The police told me Elena died in that crash. They said there was no way anyone could have survived long enough to leave the scene. I swallowed slowly. "Your mother gave it to you?" I repeated. She nodded once, but kept watching me carefully, like she was waiting for me to accuse her of stealing it. I crouched slightly so we were closer to eye level. I didn't want to tower over her like some interrogator. "Do you remember when?" I asked. She shrugged again. "Long time. That answer was vague, but children measure time differently. A long time to her could mean months or years. My pulse sped up again. Do you live with your mother? The moment I asked, the air shifted. Her eyes dropped to the pavement. No answer. That silence told me more than words ever could. My stomach sank. Where is she now? I asked quietly. Maya rubbed her thumb over the sunflower charm before speaking. She went away. Away where? Another shrug, but this one looked heavier, the kind that carries memories a kid shouldn't have. I felt a cold knot forming in my chest. Every instinct in my body was telling me something about this story wasn't right. Did she tell you anything about the bracelet? I asked. She nodded slightly. Said never lose it. My throat tightened. Did she say why? Maya finally looked up at me fully, and when she did, I felt a strange jolt of familiarity that made my skin prickle. It wasn't just the eyes now. It was the expression, the way she studied me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She said, Maya paused, thinking carefully. She said it belonged to my real family. My heart stopped. A ringing filled my ears like the world had suddenly moved underwater. I struggled to keep my voice steady. Your real family? I repeated. She nodded. She said one day they might find me. The ground beneath me felt unstable. My mind was racing so fast it hurt. The crash, the missing body, the bracelet, this girl standing in front of me with Lily's eyes and Lily's bracelet, and a story that sounded like someone had tried to hide the truth from the world. Maya, I said slowly, how old are you? She frowned slightly, like she didn't get asked that question often. 9. 9. My daughter would have been 10. The difference was small enough that fear crept into every corner of my thoughts. Children on the street often don't know their exact age, but something inside me whispered that the number wasn't random. Do you remember where you were born? I asked. She shook her head. Hospital, maybe. That answer would have sounded funny under normal circumstances, but right now it felt like someone was tightening a rope around my chest. I needed to slow down. If I pushed too far, she'd shut down completely. So I shifted the conversation. Are you hungry? I asked again. She hesitated, then nodded once. That tiny admission made something ache inside me even more. I gestured toward the street. Let's get some food. You can bring your bag. I promise nobody will take it. She studied my face again, searching for lies. When she didn't find any, she followed me cautiously toward the gate. The security guard looked confused seeing me walk beside a trash-picking child, but I gave him a look that told him to keep quiet. We crossed the street to the small cafe I usually visited during long workdays. The warmth hit us immediately when we stepped inside. Maya paused near the door, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. I suddenly realized places like this probably made her feel like an intruder. It's okay, I said gently. She followed me to a booth but kept her bag close, like it was something precious. I ordered 2 breakfasts without asking what she wanted, because hungry kids rarely care about menus. When the waitress left, Maya looked around the cafe with wide eyes. People sipping coffee, typing on laptops, living ordinary lives, while my entire reality felt like it was tilting sideways. Do you go to school? I asked. She shook her head quickly. Used to. What happened? Moved. Her answers were always short, like someone had trained her not to explain too much. The food arrived, and for the next few minutes, she focused entirely on eating. She tried to be polite about it, but hunger always wins. That alone told me how often she probably skipped meals. I watched her quietly, and the longer I looked, the harder it became to breathe. There were tiny things, the way she pushed her hair behind her ear, the way her nose wrinkled when the eggs were too hot. Lily used to do that exact same thing. My hands trembled slightly under the table. My brain kept warning me not to jump to conclusions. Grief can trick people into seeing ghosts, but this didn't feel like imagination. It felt like standing inches away from a locked door that had been closed for 8 years. Finally, she slowed down and noticed I was staring. She wiped her mouth awkwardly. "What?" she asked. I forced a small smile. "Nothing. You just reminded me of someone." She tilted her head slightly. "Your daughter?" Maya stared at the table for a long time before answering. My question clearly reached into a place she didn't visit often. I stayed quiet because rushing memories out of someone, especially a child who had survived too much, can make them shut the door completely. Finally, she spoke. "Rain," she said softly. I leaned forward slightly. "Rain?" She nodded. "And loud sounds, like metal." My pulse immediately quickened. Images from the accident report flashed through my mind, twisted pieces of car frame, rain pouring down on the highway, emergency lights reflecting off wet asphalt. "Anything else?" I asked gently. She frowned, trying to pull details from somewhere deep inside her mind. "A lady yelling. My mama, maybe." My throat tightened. What was she saying? Maya squinted slightly, like she was replaying an old, blurry movie. She kept saying, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." A chill crawled up my spine. That didn't sound like a memory from a hospital birth. It sounded like chaos. My fingers slowly curled against the table as I forced myself to stay calm. "Do you remember a car?" I asked carefully. Her eyes flickered with recognition. "Yes." My chest tightened. "Was anyone else there?" She hesitated. "A man." My heart skipped once. "What man?" She shook her head. "Don't know." "Was he helping?" Another pause, this one longer. "No," she whispered. The word landed heavily between us. My breathing slowed into something deliberate. I knew I had to be careful not to guide her answers. Children sometimes fill gaps with what they think adults want to hear, but the tension in her voice didn't sound invented. It sounded remembered. "What do you remember about him?" I asked. Maya rubbed the bracelet again while thinking. "Big coat. Smell like smoke." My stomach twisted. The accident had involved fire, according to the report, but something about the way she described it made it sound less like a rescue and more like something else entirely. "Did he talk to you?" I asked. She nodded slightly. Said, "Be quiet." The cafe suddenly felt too small. My mind was racing through possibilities I didn't want to believe. If someone had taken Lily from that crash scene, why? And why would they keep her alive only to abandon her years later? Unless she had been useful in some way or hidden for a reason. I realized my hands were shaking again and quickly folded them together under the table. Maya noticed. She studied my face with quiet curiosity. "You okay?" she asked softly. I forced a small breath. "I'm just thinking." She nodded, like that made sense. Then she said something that made the room spin again. "You look familiar." My heart jumped. "I do?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me more carefully now. "Maybe when I was little." The air left my lungs slowly. That single sentence cracked something open inside me. Hope. A terrifying, dangerous hope. "Where do you think you saw me?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Don't know. Maybe dream." Children often blur dreams and early memories, especially when trauma is involved. But something in her eyes told me she was trying to connect pieces that didn't quite fit yet. I leaned back slightly, giving her space. "Do you remember living somewhere with a yard?" I asked gently. She blinked, then frowned. "Maybe." A yellow swing? The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I didn't want to plant false memories, but Maya's expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened just a little. "There was a swing," she said quietly. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What color?" I asked, barely breathing. She thought for several seconds. "Yellow," she whispered. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Elena had insisted on that swing. She said every child deserves something bright in the backyard, even during cloudy days. My hands pressed against the table to steady myself. This couldn't be coincidence. There were too many pieces starting to line up, but logic kept whispering caution. People can accidentally match details when guided by questions, so I forced myself to step back. "Do you remember who pushed you on the swing?" I asked carefully. Her eyes flickered with recognition. "Yes." My chest tightened. "Was anyone else there?" She hesitated. "A man." My heart skipped once. "What man?" She shook her head. "Don't know." "Was he helping?" Another pause. This one longer. "No," she whispered. The word landed heavily between us. My breathing slowed into something deliberate. I knew I had to be careful not to guide her answers. Children sometimes fill gaps with what they think adults want to hear, but the tension in her voice didn't sound invented. It sounded remembered. "What do you remember about him?" I asked. Maya rubbed the bracelet again while thinking. "Big coat. Smell like smoke." My stomach twisted. The accident had involved fire, according to the report, but something about the way she described it made it sound less like a rescue and more like something else entirely. "Did he talk to you?" I asked. She nodded slightly. Said, "Be quiet." The cafe suddenly felt too small. My mind was racing through possibilities I didn't want to believe. If someone had taken Lily from that crash scene, why? And why would they keep her alive only to abandon her years later? Unless she had been useful in some way, or hidden for a reason. I realized my hands were shaking again and quickly folded them together under the table. Maya noticed. She studied my face with quiet curiosity. "You okay?" she asked softly. I forced a small breath. "I'm just thinking." She nodded, like that made sense. Then she said something. The word home hung between us like a fragile piece of glass that could shatter if either of us moved too quickly. My chest felt tight and warm at the same time, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. I had spent 8 years imagining every possible version of losing my daughter, but I had never prepared for the possibility that she might still exist somewhere in the world, sitting across from me, holding a glass of orange juice and wearing the same bracelet I once fastened around her tiny wrist. Maya didn't seem to realize the earthquake happening inside my mind. She was watching the sunflower charm spin slowly as she moved her hand. "My mama said families can find each other if something important stays safe," she said quietly. I forced myself to remain calm, even though my heart was racing. "Did she say anything else about your family?" I asked. Maya thought for a moment. "She said my father was rich." The air left my lungs in a slow, stunned breath. My throat felt dry. "Did she tell you his name?" I asked. She shook her head. She said it was better if I didn't know yet. My fingers tightened against the table. My mind was starting to assemble pieces that I wasn't ready to accept. The crash, the missing body, the bracelet, the strange story about bad people and money. And now this. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Why would it be dangerous for you to know?" Maya shrugged again, but her face had grown serious. She said some people didn't want me found. A cold sensation crept down my spine. My company had grown quickly over the last decade. We had taken contracts from powerful people. We had stepped on the toes of larger corporations. There had been lawsuits, threats, aggressive competitors. At the time of the accident, Elena had been reviewing documents related to a major merger deal. I suddenly remembered something that made my stomach twist. Elena had argued with someone on the phone 2 nights before the crash. She never told me who it was. I had brushed it off as business stress, but now the memory came back sharper than ever. I leaned forward slightly. "Maya, where did you live with your mother?" She looked uncertain. "Different places." "Do you remember the last one?" "A small apartment above a shop." "What kind of shop?" "Fixing phones, maybe?" Her answers were patchy, but that was normal for a child who had moved a lot. I could already feel a quiet determination building inside me. If there was even the smallest chance this girl was Lily, I would tear the world apart to find the truth. "Where is your mother now?" I asked again. She went quiet. Her fingers stopped moving on the bracelet. After several seconds, she spoke so softly I almost didn't hear it. "She got sick." "How long ago?" "Last winter." The heaviness in her voice told me everything before she even finished the story. I started gently. Maya nodded without looking up. "She told me, keep Bracelet. She said wait near big buildings where important people work." My heart twisted painfully. "Did she say why?" "She said my father would recognize it." For a moment, the cafe seemed to fade away completely. All the noise, all the movement, all the normal life around us disappeared under the weight of that sentence. My eyes burned unexpectedly. I had searched for signs of Lily for years. After the accident, I hired investigators. I followed every rumor, every possible lead. But eventually, everyone told me the same thing. "You need to move on," they said. There was no evidence she survived, so I buried my hope along with Elena's memory. And now a little girl who looked like my daughter was sitting across from me, calmly explaining that someone had expected me to recognize a bracelet. "Maya," I said slowly, "how long have you been collecting bottles near my building?" She shrugged slightly. "Few weeks." My heart skipped again. "Why that building?" She pointed casually toward the window where the tall glass structure of my company headquarters rose above the street. "Name on it." My pulse quickened. "What about it?" She looked confused. "Mama said my father worked somewhere with that name." Every sound in the cafe came rushing back at once. My ears rang. My vision blurred for a moment. I gripped the edge of the table because the room suddenly felt unsteady. She had been coming to my building on purpose, not just searching trash. She had been waiting. My voice barely came out. "What name did she say?" Maya looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Harwood." The word hit me like thunder, cracking through my chest. My last name. The name printed across the top of the 12-story building where I had worked every day while this child searched the dumpsters outside, hoping someone would notice her bracelet. My hands started shaking so badly I had to clasp them together again. Maya noticed. She tilted her head slightly. "Did I say something wrong?" I swallowed hard, trying to hold myself together. "No," I whispered. "You didn't." For a long moment, I couldn't speak at all. My mind was racing through every memory I had of Lily, every tiny detail of her childhood, the curve of her smile, the way she used to tilt her head when she was curious. And sitting across from me, I saw echoes of the... For several seconds, I couldn't hear anything except the sound of my own heartbeat. Lily. The name echoed through my mind like a bell that had been silent for 8 years. My vision blurred and I had to blink hard to keep myself together. The little girl sitting across from me shifted slightly in the booth, watching my reaction with quiet uncertainty. She had no idea that one word had just cracked open a part of my life I had sealed shut to survive. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked softly. I shook my head quickly, but my throat felt tight. "No," I said, though my voice trembled. "You didn't do anything wrong at all." I took a slow breath, trying to steady the storm inside my chest. I knew I had to be careful. This moment could not be rushed. If I overwhelmed her or forced answers, she might shut down, or worse, run again. So I leaned back slightly and softened my tone. "When you heard that name, Lily, what do you remember?" Maya looked down at the bracelet again. Her small fingers traced the sunflower charm like it helped her think. "Someone calling it," she said quietly. "Who?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "Man voice." My heart tightened painfully. "Do you remember what he sounded like?" She shrugged faintly. "Kind." The word felt like a knife and a gift at the same time. I pressed my lips together, trying not to let my emotions spill over and scare her. The cafe hummed with quiet conversations around us, but it all felt distant, like we were sitting in the center of a completely different world. I realized my hands were still shaking slightly on the table, and I forced them to be still. "Maya, there's something important I want to ask you," I said gently. She looked up immediately alert. Children who survive hard lives learn to listen carefully when adults say things like that. "Okay," she said. I swallowed slowly. "Do you remember ever having a different bracelet before that one?" Her eyebrows pulled together slightly. She looked down at her wrist again. "No, this one always." My chest tightened. That was exactly how it had been with Lily. She refused to take it off even when Aleda tried to clean it or polish it. She used to say it was her lucky flower. I leaned forward just a little. "Do you remember a woman named Elena?" The reaction was instant. Maya's eyes widened slightly. She didn't speak, but something changed in her face. A flicker of recognition, or maybe a memory trying to surface. My heart began pounding again. "Does that name feel familiar?" I asked softly. She pressed her lips together, thinking hard. "Maybe," she murmured. "Was she nice?" My throat closed for a moment. Elena had been warmth itself, the kind of person who made strangers feel safe in seconds. "Yes," I said quietly. "Very nice." Maya looked down again like she was searching inside herself. "I remember someone singing," she said slowly. My breath caught. Elena used to sing while cooking, while cleaning, while tucking Lily into bed. It was one of the sounds that used to fill our home with life. "Do you remember the song?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, just soft." Tears threatened to rise in my eyes, but I forced them back. This wasn't the moment to fall apart. I needed clarity, I needed truth, and there was one way to begin finding it. "Maya," I said carefully, "would you be okay if we checked something together?" She looked cautious again. "What?" I hesitated only a second. "A doctor could help answer some questions about your past. Not today, if you don't want, but soon." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" The honesty in children can be brutal sometimes, so I decided not to lie. "Because I think you might be someone very important to me." She studied my face for a long time, measuring every word. Then she asked the question I had been hoping for and fearing. "Your daughter?" My voice barely came out. "Maybe." Silence settled between us again, but this time it felt different, heavier, real. Maya looked down at her bracelet once more. Then she surprised me by asking something I hadn't expected. "If I am, would you be mad I took bottles?" My chest broke open a little at that question. "Mad?" I repeated. She nodded nervously. "Some people get mad when kids make mess." Emotion rushed through me so suddenly it almost hurt. I leaned forward instinctively, my voice thick with feeling. "No," I said softly. "If you are my daughter, I would only be sorry I wasn't there to protect you." Her eyes searched mine carefully, like she was testing whether those words were real, and slowly, very slowly, some of the tension left her shoulders. The moment was fragile but powerful. At the same time, my mind was already racing ahead. There were things I needed to confirm: documents, police reports, the hospital records from the accident, and most importantly, a DNA test. But even before any of that, a quiet certainty had started growing inside my chest. The way she spoke, the way she looked at me, the memories just beginning to surface, none of it felt random. None of it felt like coincidence. It felt like something lost trying to find its way home. I glanced down again at the bracelet and noticed something I hadn't seen earlier. There was a tiny engraving on the inside of the clasp. My breath caught. I remembered that engraving clearly because I had ordered it myself the day Lily turned 4. I gently pointed to it. "Maya, have you ever opened the clasp before?" She shook her head. "Hard." My fingers trembled slightly. "May I try?" She hesitated only a second before holding her wrist toward me carefully. I reached out slowly, my hands unsteady not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. The metal was warm from her skin. As I turned the clasp, the tiny engraving caught the light, and there it was, the 2 words that changed everything. Lily Rose. My vision blurred instantly. The world around us disappeared under a wave of emotion so strong I could barely. The letters blurred in front of my eyes, but I didn't need to read them twice. I knew them. I had chosen them. I had stood in a small jewelry store 10 years ago while the clerk smiled and asked what message a father would like to leave for his daughter's birthday, and without thinking, I said 2 simple words: Lily Rose. My hands started shaking so badly I had to hold the bracelet with both fingers just to keep it steady. Maya watched my face carefully. She could tell something serious had just happened, even if she didn't fully understand what. "What does it say?" she asked quietly. My throat felt tight. I forced myself to breathe before answering. "It says Lily Rose." The moment the words left my mouth, the air between us changed. She frowned slightly, like the name stirred something distant in her memory. "Rose," she repeated softly. Then she looked up at me. "That's pretty." My chest ached with a mixture of hope and fear. I wanted to pull her into my arms. I wanted to cry. I wanted to demand answers from the entire world all at once. But I knew I couldn't rush this moment. This little girl had lived a life full of uncertainty. She deserved patience, not pressure. So I carefully released the bracelet and leaned back slightly, even though every instinct inside me wanted to hold on. "Maya," I said gently, "there's something important I need to tell you." She sat very still, watching my face. "Okay." I swallowed slowly. "That bracelet used to belong to my daughter." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. "The name on it," I continued carefully, "is her name." She looked down at the bracelet again, then back at me. "Lily?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." Silence stretched across the booth. People walked past us carrying coffee cups. The espresso machine hissed somewhere behind the counter, but inside that small space, the world had narrowed to just the 2 of us and a bracelet connecting the past to the present. Maya studied my face for a long moment. Then she asked a question so quiet it almost broke me. "Are you sure?" My voice trembled slightly, but I didn't look away. "I'm sure. I had this bracelet made for my daughter." She touched the sunflower charm again, almost protectively. "Mama said it would find the right person," she whispered. My chest tightened painfully. Your mama was right. Another silence settled between us, but this time it felt heavier with possibility. I could see thoughts moving behind her eyes. She wasn't a little child who believed things instantly. She had survived too much for that. She needed truth, not wishes. Finally, she spoke again. If that was your daughter, where is she? The question cut straight through me. I held her gaze, even though my voice came out rough. For 8 years, I thought she died. Maya's fingers stopped moving on the bracelet. She looked confused. But I didn't. Those 4 simple words made my heart skip painfully. I leaned forward slowly, trying to keep my emotions steady. That's what I'm starting to believe, too. Her eyebrows pulled together. You think I'm her? It wasn't a question, it was a careful observation. I nodded slowly. I think it's possible. She didn't panic, she didn't smile. She just looked thoughtful, like someone trying to solve a puzzle that had followed her whole life. Mama said my father was important. She said he would know. My chest tightened again. Did she ever tell you why you were separated from him? Maya shook her head. Only that bad people were watching. A cold weight settled in my stomach again. That sentence matched the uneasy feeling growing inside me since this conversation began. Something had happened that night years ago, something bigger than a simple accident. I leaned back slightly, running a hand across my face, trying to think clearly. Maya, I said gently, there are ways we can find out the truth. She looked cautious again. What ways? A test, a simple one. It can tell if 2 people are family. She studied me silently for several seconds. Then she asked something that made my chest ache all over again. If it says yes, what happens? I didn't hesitate. Then you come home with me. The words felt both terrifying and completely natural at the same time. Her eyes widened slightly. Your house? Our house, I said quietly. She looked down at the table, absorbing that idea. For a child who had been moving from place to place, the word home probably felt complicated. Finally, she spoke again. What if it says no? The question was honest, fair. I smiled gently, even though my heart was pounding. Then you'll still never have to dig through trash again. Her eyes flickered with surprise. Why? Because no kid should live like that, not if I can help it. She watched me carefully again, measuring the truth in my voice, and slowly, very slowly, I saw something soften in her expression. Not full trust, not yet, but something close to it. She glanced down at the bracelet again, turning it slightly so the engraving caught the light. Lily Rose. She read it silently this time. Then she looked back at me. You really think that's me? She asked. My throat tightened. I answered honestly. My heart thinks it might be. For the first time since we met, she smiled just a little. And in that small smile, I saw a flash of the little girl who used to run down my hallway wearing star-covered socks, asking for bedtime stories. My chest filled with emotion so strong I had to blink hard to stay composed. But even in that moment of hope, a darker thought was forming quietly in the back of my mind. Because if Maya truly was Lily, then someone had taken my daughter from that crash, and someone had lied about it for 8 years, and whoever did that might still be out there watching. We weren't at the end of the story. We were only standing at the doorway of the truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe noise returned slowly, like the world was turning its volume back up after holding its breath. I looked at the little girl across from me, this child who might be my daughter, and realized that whatever happened next would change both of our lives forever. But before anything else, there was something I needed to do right. I couldn't just pull her into a storm of lawyers, tests, and questions. I needed to make her feel safe first. Maya, I said gently. "How would you feel about seeing where I live?" She blinked in surprise. "Right now?" I smiled softly. "Only if you want to." She looked down at her bag of bottles, then around the cafe like she was measuring the distance between the life she knew and the unknown one in front of her. After a few seconds, she nodded slowly. "Okay." Those two simple letters filled my chest with a strange mix of hope and responsibility. I paid for the food and we stepped outside together. The afternoon air had warmed slightly, but a light wind still carried the smell of the city. Maya walked beside me quietly, her small hand holding the strap of her sack like it was something important she couldn't abandon. When we reached my car, she hesitated. "I've never been in one like this," she admitted softly. I opened the passenger door and smiled. First time for everything. She climbed in carefully, like the leather seats might reject her presence. I noticed how gently she moved, as if she had learned not to disturb things that didn't belong to her. That alone broke my heart a little more. The drive to my house was quiet. At first, she stared out the window, watching buildings pass like scenes in a movie. Eventually, she spoke. "Your building is very big." I nodded. "It didn't start that way." She looked curious. "You made it?" "With a lot of help," I said, "and a lot of long nights." She thought about that for a moment. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "Mama used to say my father worked too much." I let out a slow breath. She might have been right. 20 minutes later, we turned into the long driveway of my home. The house wasn't a mansion like people imagine CEOs owning. It was large but quiet, hidden behind tall trees that Elena once insisted made it feel peaceful. The moment the car stopped, Maya froze slightly, staring at the front yard. Her eyes widened. "The swing," she whispered. My heart skipped. I followed her gaze, and there it was, the yellow swing. Elena never let me remove it, even after the accident. She used to say maybe someday another child visiting would want to use it, but I never had the heart to take it down. Maya slowly stepped out of the car and walked toward it like someone approaching a memory. Her fingers touched the rope gently. Then she sat down. The swing creaked softly as she moved back and forth, and suddenly tears blurred my vision, because the way she kicked her feet was exactly the same as Lily used to do. She laughed quietly under her breath. "I remember this," she said. My chest tightened so painfully I had to grip the car door for support. "You do?" She nodded slowly, still swinging. "Someone pushed me really high." My voice cracked slightly. "Did you like that?" She smiled wider. "Yes." I walked closer, my heart racing with a mixture of joy and fear. "Maya," I said softly, "there's something we should do next." She stopped swinging and looked up at me. "The test?" I nodded. She thought about it for only a second this time. "Okay." The next 2 days felt longer than the last 8 years combined. I arranged the DNA test with a private lab I trusted. The process itself was simple, just a cheek swab, but waiting for the results was something else entirely. I brought Maya back to the house and prepared one of the guest rooms. She kept looking around like she was afraid the place might disappear if she blinked too long. That first night, she asked if she could keep the light on. I told her, of course. On the third morning, the call finally came. I stood in my office holding the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The doctor's voice was calm but direct. "Mr. Harwood, the results are conclusive." My heart nearly stopped. "And?" There was a brief pause, then the words I had been waiting 8 years to hear. "She is your daughter." For a second, the world went completely silent. I closed my eyes and felt something inside my chest break open, not with pain this time, but relief, so powerful it almost knocked the air out of me. I thanked the doctor, but I barely remember the conversation after that. My feet were already moving. I found Maya sitting in the living room floor, building a small tower out of old magazines. She looked up the moment I entered the room. My voice trembled slightly. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you." She stood slowly, watching my face. The test came back. Her fingers tightened around the bracelet.